All right. Well, the other big story out of Detroit this week, one less candidate on the ballot for mayor. Last week, a Wayne County judge ordered Mike Duggan removed from the ballot, saying he didn't fulfill the residency requirement. And on Tuesday, the Michigan Court of Appeals upheld that ruling. So on Wednesday, Duggan said, "I'm out." What does this mean for the race? And what about the speculation on Duggan's next move? First off, was this a surprise to you that he just said, forget it, I'm not going to take this any further?
It was. I thought, what did he have to lose to go to the Supreme Court? He didn't think he could win once he got there for a lot of reasons. He told me this week that when he looked at the complaint that Tom Barrow had filed, when he looked at the case, he said, my God, I think he's got me, because the way the charter's written. I don't think the charter was intended to be written that way, but it is. And these courts ruled strictly on the language, and he just didn't feel like he could prevail. I thought he should have given the Supreme Court a chance to clarify things and stand up on behalf of a more inclusive election law, but he didn't think he could win. Now, he still wants to be around Detroit, he says. He still wants to help out. He says he's got good relationships with the governor's office and would like for the governor to find a role for him in helping bring Detroit back. So we'll see what that looks like.
Okay, so this is obviously Mike Duggan loses. Who else loses in this?
Well, I think the people who signed his petitions clearly lose, but I think statewide, you've now got an appeals court ruling that favors these sort of minor technicalities over access to the ballot and voter participation, which is a very dangerous precedent. And the Supreme Court sort of kicked the door open to some of this last year with some of their rulings. We need them. The reason I wanted him to appeal this was to clear it up going down the road, that it's not okay. It's not okay to use election law, as Nolan has said, as a gotcha game. That's not the purpose of it. It is supposed to be inclusive. It's supposed to be there to make sure that people can get access to the ballot. These were abominable rulings in that context, and the courts should be ashamed of themselves, frankly. But
it goes back to that city charter, which it's just
ambiguous.
It's just a mess, and you've got rule of law judges saying, look, I've got a rule on what the thing says. I can't go back and try and discern intent. And the charter in many areas is it was just a bad job.
Well, I mean, the other wrinkle here that no one has really talked much about is the role of the clerk. If those petitions were invalid when Duggan presented them, the clerk should have said, well, I can't take those from you, right?
Right.
You've got to wait 2 weeks or whatever it was until you're at a full year. That's a breakdown in the system too. If this is the interpretation that was going to be used, the clerk had a role to play because he had a right as a candidate to remedy the.
Yeah, I mean, if he turned it in and she put the stamp on it, you'd think that, okay, well then I'm good.
And the Election Commission certified him.
That's right.
And he contends that she urged the candidites to file their petitions early to facilitate the verification process. So, he was, again, I mean, it was
a colossal misstep too. So what does this mean for Benny Napoleon, who's now the front runner here? Where do Mike Duggan's votes go? To who? Is there another candidate that's going to surge forward, or does Benny Napoleon have this?
It's Detroit, right? Anything can happen.
We use that answer about 50 times a week.
I think you'd be crazy to predict anything in this race at this point. Right now, it does look like it's Napoleon's to lose, but the news happens every day around here, and something else could come up, and he could get knocked out. I still think the field is very, very weak, and I will go back to what I said 6 weeks ago. I think everybody now would love to have Dave Bing among the choices on that ballot, and the fact that he's not. Nothing you can do about it now.
Nothing you can do about any of it now. I would suspect some of those votes would go to Lisa Housey, perhaps. I mean, Lisa House. I mean, she performed well in the debate we had up on Mackinac, and she's been, she's of the field one of the more rational candidates.
All right. So what does Mike Duggan do next? Is he running for governor?
No.
Well, I saw that headline, and we have to talk about it a little bit. But what's his logical next move? Does this make the Wayne County executive race a lot more interesting?
He said he absolutely doesn't want to do that. He may not run for any office. He may, he said he's going to look for business opportunities. Remember, this guy has been in business for the last 7, 8 years and made a whole lot of money. I don't think I don't think he burns to have an elected office. I think he would have liked to have been the mayor of Detroit, but I don't think he wants to be the Wayne County executive. And I don't think he's going to run against Rick Snyder for governor. I don't think he's that stupid.
End of the elective road for Mike Duggan?
I don't think it's the end of the, I think this is a guy who, despite having, a lot of money and having done really well at DMC, I think he's somebody who's really driven and feels like he's got something to offer. He's got to find the way to do that. I wouldn't rule out, another elective office if he thinks he could win. And Wayne County executive, I don't know, maybe with Ficano being as weak as he is.
He's not going to run for that. What he says is, I've been there.
Sure.
He's not going to run for that office. But you can do a lot of good outside the elective process. You can have a lot of impact, and in many ways you can do more. And he may find a role for himself outside.
It's interesting though, because he obviously has passion and he has drive and he has connections. And for someone then to say, well, forget it, I'm not going to do any kind of political office.
Well, I don't think he's going to run against Rick Snyder. That doesn't mean he's not someday going to run for governor. Rick Snyder won't be on the ballot in 4 years, and Democrats will again be looking for a candidate, and there'll probably be a lot of pressure on him to run.
I also want to mention that Detroit City Councilman Kwame Kenyatta is resigning today. You wrote a column this week.
Nolan won't leave him alone.
Well, he hasn't showed up for work since February, and since November, actually. He's barely been around. He says he's sick. Well, we all appreciate that people get sick, but in the meanwhile, he's out there writing books, promoting books, having, book luncheons. He walks through City Hall. Folks say he looks fine. I think he's just sick of his job. I don't doubt his illness, but he's clearly sick of his job. He went on a long diatribe about the council doesn't mean anything. It has no authority. There's no reason to be there. Well, if you feel that way, he's doing the right thing to get out and stop drawing a paycheck that he's not earning.
Is he doing the right thing?
Oh, I think so, and he has very strong feelings that, I disagree with the conclusion, but he feels like, Detroiters were done dirty on this emergency manager deal. The council has been relegated to almost no power at all, so I think the honorable thing to do in that situation is to say, I don't want to be part of this. He probably should have done it when they appointed Kevyn Orr.
All right, well, let's take you to Lansing now. Governor Snyder cut short his trip to Israel, but it didn't help bring Medicaid legislation to a vote. Yesterday, the governor, visibly frustrated, lashed out at Senate Republicans, saying they should take a vote, not a vacation. So what happens now? This was very interesting how this came down to the wire yesterday.
The governor got on a plane to come back to say, get your act together.
He was angry.
He was, because he had the 20 votes. And that's what you can't get lost here. He had 20 votes. He had 10 Republican votes. Or he actually had 21 votes, I think. He had all the Democrats, all 11 Democrats, and he had 10 Republican votes. He had enough votes to pass this thing, and Randy Richardville wouldn't put it to a vote. Now, Richardville should have put that to a vote. He embarrassed his governor. He put Rick Snyder in a bad position, a bad situation. Snyder invested capital by coming back from Israel and lobbying on it, and Richardville just thumbed his nose at him, and it really for no good. This was not going to stick to Richardville.
No, I don't think it's going to hurt. I don't think it's going to hurt Richardville. And I'm puzzled a little. I have not talked to Randy about this, but I'm a little puzzled about what his calculus was here, his political calculus. I'm not sure who he thought he was providing cover for. You had Republicans, 10 Republicans say, look, I think I can do this. And then you have leadership say, well, I won't do it because of the minority who say, well, we don't want it at all. It's not a good example of leadership. I'm a pretty big fan of Richardville's generally, and the way he's run the Senate way better than Jace Bolger's run the House. But in this case, he really just booted this.
And Bolger's
deserves credit. Yeah.
He put this bill together, but Bolger, Snyder thought they had a deal with Richardville.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons you saw the governor in a rare display of anger. They thought they had a deal with Richardville to bring it to a vote, and he would never bring it to the vote, and it was extraordinarily frustrating.
I think things like that play out like they did play out yesterday is what really frustrates people about Lansing. And they say, well, if you had a deal, how come things like this can't get done? So let me ask you this. Going forward, what does this say for Governor Snyder's relationship with Randy Richardville and his ability to get anything done coming up after?
They'll work
it out. But how do you work that out? It embarrassed him.
For now, but this will come back in the fall, and they'll start again, and they'll be working in perhaps a different environment. One of the things that happened yesterday, you had a lot of folks out there putting pressure on Richardville, saying, look, if we stop this in Michigan, maybe we can force a rewrite of the law nationwide. That was going around yesterday morning, a lot of phone calls being made. You're not going to get rid of Obamacare, but Richardville made a calculation that still a majority of people oppose this law, and nothing they do that slows this law down is going to hurt them politically. They'll work on it over the summer. He and the governor have worked together on a lot of things, and they'll continue to do so.
What does that conversation look like, Stephen?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think, Governor Snyder has given in on a lot of stuff with this crazy Republican caucus in the legislature, stuff that he says he's not about, but he's like, well, that's what they want to do. I won't stand in the way. Now he asked them for something that means something to him, and they stiff him. I think he's got to re-examine the relationship he has with legislators. As governor, he's got to be able to control his own caucus.
Well, that's a bit of an overstatement, though, Steve. This governor has gotten a lot from the legislature, too.
He has.
That pension tax was not easy. He continued to get education reform last year. Even though many in his own caucus were afraid to do things. I don't think so. He pointed out yesterday that they've still continued to make huge progress on regulatory.
This has been the least productive of the legislative session since he's been governor. In terms of his agenda.
His agenda is all about improving the business climate.
Roads,
they get a lot of things.
Medicaid.
And they'll have a road deal. They didn't get it all once, but they'll have a road deal this fall. I predict they'll have a Medicaid deal this fall.
All right, well, because let's bring it back around to Medicaid. What is the future for that?
We're going to have to do it. There's no good reason to leave this money on the table and essentially have Michiganders subsidize Medicaid expansions in other states, which is exactly what's going to happen. There's nothing, the frustrating thing about this is that there's nothing conservative about the argument that they're making. It's foolish.
That's just absurd, Steve. Of course there is. This is not just about Republican Pike. A lot of people don't believe, and forgive them for that, the president's promise that this is not going to cost the state money. We know for 3 years.
But we know it'll cost us money if we don't do it now.
We know for 3 years this great expansion of Medicaid, this great expansion of another entitlement is going to be paid for by the federal government if it can afford it. But there's no assurances beyond that the state won't get stuck with the bill.
So you fix it
so
then.
in 4 or 5, it's much harder to repeal an entitlement than it is not to get into it in the first place.
Or maybe
and a lot of
you
folks
start
are
to
worried
pay
that
for it.
4 or 5 years from now, the choice is going to be, do we continue these massive welfare payments and cut education, cut roads,
or how
cut
about
everything
this?
else?
How about this?
Last
Raise
word.
the money to pay for it.
Yeah, sure. That's the answer to everything.
About
let's
cutting.
make this an extraordinarily high tax state, and then see where the jobs come
let's